Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. I'm your host, Ricky Rodri. You can find me at RickyRod66. Tonight, once again, we're going to talk about snaps and playing time for individual defensive players. We're going to hit on some alignments. We're going to hit on some injuries. We're going to talk about some waivers and players to pick up. And with that, let's get started. All righty, welcome back, everyone, this week. Glad to have everybody with us, or with me in this case. As we've been doing the past several weeks, we're going to go conference by conference, then we're going to go division by division. Now, one of the things I would like y'all feedback on, if y'all would put into the comments, is would y'all like me to break this up into a NFC podcast in an AFC, or just keep it all as one? So please add your comments below. Let me know. And also let me know what you do like and don't like so we can adjust for the future. All right, let's jump into it. NFC North, the Bears, who questionable call by Coach Eberflus, not trying to get that field goal a little bit closer, but they lost to the Packers. The Bears on defense only played 46 snaps. So that's the first thing I want to make sure, which is a very low number as we've talked about the past several weeks. Jaquan Brisker finally put on IR after being out for almost 5 weeks. Once again, Elijah Hicks played in his absence, but he only played 85% of the snaps. Excuse me, yes, 85% of the snaps. He only had 4 tackles, 2 of which were solo during that time. He left with an injury, which really wasn't reported during the games, but I did some reading subsequently and found that there was some sort of injury, although I couldn't get specifics. Jonathan Owens played the last 15% of the snaps, had 1 assisted tackle. So if you picked up Hicks and have been playing him in deeper leagues, you might not have him available this Sunday. Keep an eye out for that. Jonathan Owens may be your desperation measure with so many teams on bye. Kevin Byard led the team in tackles with 9 and 4 solo, and that's after last week having 11 tackles and 5 solo and 1 pass defense. Are they starting to play things a little bit different now with Jaquan Brisker being out for so long? I think the answer to that is yes. So Byard has become a better player the last couple of weeks, and I expect that to continue regardless of Hicks versus Owens. Tremaine Edmonds, once again, 46 snaps, so you can't expect a lot of counting stats for IDP with that limited snap count. Edmonds, 7 tackle, 1 solo. T.J. Edwards, 6 tackles, 5 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Montez Sweat last week played about 45% of the snaps. He was coming back from that shin injury. Came back this week back to 78%, a little bit more than he had typically been playing, but only 1 assisted tackle basically for a second week in a row. He did have 1 pass defense last week. 1 quarterback hit, but boy, still continuing to disappoint, not putting Sweat in my lineup right now. Let's go to the Lions, who absolutely decimated the Jaguars this past week. Another very, very low snap count on defense. Bears 46 snaps, Lions 48. So that's where we're starting with our first 2 teams here tonight, or today, I should say. Alex Anzalone, starting with the linebacker room, broke his forearm. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. He played about 42% of the snaps before he left. Now, we've already talked about in the past that Derek Barnes, Jalen Reeves-Maybin are already on IR. So what did all that mean? Jack Campbell ended up playing 94% of the snaps, and Malcolm Rodriguez, who came back from his own injury, played 90% of the snaps. Now, once again, low snap count, you can't expect a whole lot. Campbell getting 9 tackles on 48 snaps is not too bad at all. He also had 3 solo of that 9, half a sack, and a quarterback hit to boot. Rodriguez had 4 tackles and 2 solo, which is not great for 90%. Couple of things to watch out for. One is, I don't think Ben Neiman, Trevor Nowaski, Ezekiel Turner are going to take away much playing time from Rodriguez. So I think Campbell's close to 100%. I think Rodriguez is in that 80 to 90% range. But David Long, who the Dolphins just released after signing Terrell Dodson, got signed to the Lions practice squad. If you haven't dropped Long yet, I wouldn't drop him. I'd still hold him. I have a feeling that after a week or two, we could very well see David Long moving into that lineup next to Campbell. Potentially it becomes a platoon, a rotation, as they've tended to do the linebacker position between Rodriguez and David Long at some point. Not guaranteeing that, but that's what my crystal ball says down the road. But there is a chance that Long takes over for Rodriguez and plays a much higher percent of the snaps. So that's kind of what's happened in the Lions room. I've talked about in the past not being able to trust Campbell to play 100%. With all these injuries, they almost have to play him near 100%. So feel much better about putting Campbell in my lineup now with these recent changes. Don't feel great about Rodriguez. Keep Long stash. That's linebackers. Brian Branch, 7 tackles, 5 solo. He's a stud. Unfortunately, low snap count. Zadarius Smith, who they just acquired this past, sat out the first week, played this week, played a whopping 77% of the snaps in his first game with the Lions. He had half a sack to show for that in his first action. And Josh Pascal played 88%. So on the defensive end side of things, those are going to be your 2 primary defensive ends. That's who we have to rely on for the Lions. Zadarius Smith, worth a flyer in deeper leagues. If it's more of a tackle-heavy scoring system, maybe you could play Pascal in deep leagues. Probably not touching either one of them for the most part. And lastly, just one quick shout-out, Levi Owunzurike. I think I got it right today. It's not a shout-out, it's a shout-down is what I should have said. He's been playing about 75 to 85% of the snaps the past few weeks. Until this past game against the Jaguars, he was all the way down to 23%. So Zadarius Smith has basically booted Levi out of the rotation, out of the lineup, basically, of any value. Going on to the Packers. While the Bears only played 46 snaps, the Packers actually played 72 snaps, a little bit more than average. Linebacker position for the Packers, big shift happened. Quay Walker was not part of that shift. He had 100% of the snaps. 8 tackle, 5 solo, got a pass defense in there as well. But the big change, which I've been talking about coming, Edgerrin Cooper finally played the second most snaps at the linebacker position, and it wasn't close. 71% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 5 solo. Isaiah McDuffie all the way down to 29%. Eric Wilson all the way down to 18%. Now, the week before, the last time Packers played, Eric Wilson was number 2 in snaps at the linebacker position. He fell all the way down to number 4. So with that, during that bye week, it appears they started making this shift. We've been talking about it. I've been telling y'all it's probably coming. Cooper up to 71%. I expect that to continue to inch up as we progress here into the 80s. At the defensive back position for the Packers, Xavier McKinney played his 100% of snaps as he typically does, 9 tackles, 6 solo. Didn't get an interception this week, but some good tackle numbers. Evan Williams, back from his hamstring injury, played 99% of the snaps, 6 tackle, 5 solo. I know one of the questions y'all have, but where did he line up, Ricky? He lined up with 44% of his snaps in the slot, 56% deep. Wish it would a little bit higher, closer to the slot in the box and so forth, but not too bad. We'll live with that now. I still like Williams here as we move forward. Javon Bullard, all the way down to 72% of the snaps. Of the 72% he played, 100% of those snaps were in the slot or in the box. He played 0 deep. He had 8 tackles, 6 solo. So once again, the positioning on the field makes a big difference for these cornerbacks/safeties. Him playing this in the slot, near the line of scrimmage, near the box, for all of the snaps he did play, resulted in a pretty solid tackle line for him. Jair Alexander, cornerback, left after 14% of the snaps being played with an injury. What did that mean for Keyshawn Nixon, who we love it when Keyshawn's in the slot, not quite as much when he goes on the outside? Well, he ended up going outside. Keyshawn Nixon did play 99% of the snaps, but of those, 82% were at wide corner. So considering that, 6 tackles, 4 solo, and a quarterback hit for Keyshawn Nixon, pretty good considering he played so much on the outside. But if Alexander's out, folks, really leery about playing Nixon, unless you're maybe in a return yardage league as well, and that helps to offset some of this movement to the outside. Carrington Valentine was the number 2 corner once Alexander went out. He played 89% of the snaps, 94% outside. He also had 9 tackles and 4 solo. The other thing, as I talked about, 72 snaps on defense. That's a good amount of snaps. That also helped contribute to a lot of the tackles that these outside corners had. Lastly, for the Packers, they lost Preston Smith, at the trade deadline. Then there was a bye. Who picked up the snaps is the big question. It was not Lucas Van Ness, the number one pick from last year. He stayed at roughly his 35% of snaps. Very disappointing. If I have Van Ness, that is a signal to try and trade him. There's no sign of any injuries or anything. Kingsley Enagbare, which I probably butchered his name once again, folks, and I apologize for that. He had a slight increase in snaps, so he went up slightly to the 57% range and all. Expect him to be in the 60% range as we move forward, opposite Rashawn Gary. The combo of Brenton Cox and Aaron Mosby picked up 31% snap share and 14% snap share respectively this past week. So what happened with Preston Smith snaps, Kingsley Enagbare picked up a little bit of it, but Brenton Cox and Mosby rotated and picked up the rest of it. So if you're hoping for maybe a Van Ness breakout, not happening, folks, at least not this year. Okay, finally, let's wrap up with the Vikings here, and we'll complete the NFC North. The Vikings, once again, low snap count here, 59 snaps. And that was after 44 last week, 54 the week before. Much lower than the 65 or 66 we like to see. So it's a combination of the teams they're playing and their offenses combined with how the Vikings are controlling the clock. Those things are impacting the snap count. Okay, Andrew Van Ginkel still had a very good game. 8 tackles, 7 solo, 2 sacks, 3 tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits, and most scoring, a top 5 interior defensive lineman / defensive tackle, or excuse me, not interior defensive line, edge player. My apologies for that. Trying to talk too fast, trying to get you all that information, folks. So Van Ginkel is a top 5 though, but because you just have the name recognition, you might be able to trade for him. Still trying to grab him. Patrick Jones, his snap count skyrocketed back up to 75%, but once again, on only 59 snaps. But with that, 5 tackles, 4 which were solo, 2 sacks, 3 tackle for loss, and 5 quarterback hits. Now, let's keep in mind, they were playing the freaking Titans. We know the Titans tried to upgrade their offensive line. They didn't really address the right tackle position. They lost Cushenberry, the center, to an Achilles injury for the rest of the year. So a lot of it is similar to last year with the exception of Latham and left tackle, the first round pick there. So don't get overly excited about Patrick Jones, even though he played a lot. And they probably did play him a little bit more because of low snap count. Dallas Turner, on the other hand, did go down to 20%. Part of it could be because they wanted to give Jones more playing time, and he was so freaking hot, and they kept him on the field. Part of it could have been the low snap count, so they kept Jones out there because he wasn't as tired and they didn't need as much of a rotation. But Dallas Turner's still nowhere near your lineups. At the linebacker position, Blake Cashman, 100% of the snaps he played. Unfortunately, not very efficient. 4 tackles, 2 solo. At least he got a sack, which gave him a tackle for loss and a quarterback hit as well. So not very efficient from Cashman on his first game back, or on this last game. Ivan Pace played 64% of the snaps. All he had was 4 assisted tackles. So when Cashman is back, Pace has to be hyper efficient. At least he played more than the 30 to 40% he typically plays. He was in that 60% range. But still, if he's not hyper efficient, hard to trust in the lineups. So you can't play him. Lastly, at the safety positions, I've been bringing up for multiple weeks. I'll bring it up probably this one last time unless there's a radical change. Bynum played 81% of snaps, Medalist 75%, Harrison Smith played 100. You can't play Bynum and Medalist, folks, if the team's going to have that few defensive snaps and they're going to play those few percentage of those snaps. So Bynum and Medalist, if you haven't moved into the bench yet, I think it's time. Move it to the NFC East. Commanders played 71 snaps on defense versus the Eagles. Jeremy Chin, 3rd massive game in a row, 13 tackles, 10 of which are solo. He is a top 3 safety for the rest of the season, folks. So that's where he is. No need to ask. Play him. He's got down the Quinn system. They're using him the right way. Play Jeremy Chin, no questions asked. Frankie Luvu, 10 tackles, 6 solo, couple of sacks, tackle for loss, 3 quarterback hits. Thing with Luvu, they do move him around, and when they play him more on the edge, sometimes that can make his scoring volatile. But for this past week, very good. It's because of that moving him around and putting him on the edge sometimes, and even occasionally in the slot, that it takes away from his ability to generate more IDP stats. Keep that in mind. It probably keeps him in the low 2, high 3 linebacker range. Some people would say he's more of a middle to low linebacker 3, but that's where I would treat him, even though he had that fantastic game. Dante Fowler had sacks in 6 of the 11 last 7 games, and then there was this week where he only played 37% of the snaps and had no stats at all. So I did a quick check on PFF. Fowler's pass rush win rate has not been that great this year. So while I've talked about him the past few weeks, and he has had a lot of sacks, and for scoring systems that reward big plays like sacks, that's fantastic. But no, he's not winning a lot on his own. So some of it he's falling into. So be careful how you use him and as you're considering him against other options. Mike Sainristil played 100% of the snaps, 6 tackles, 3 solo, 2 pass defenses. Now, of that 100%, he played 92% out wide. Early this year, after the NFL draft, I was really high on him and pushing for him in cornerback-only leagues because I expected him to be playing mostly in the slot. Because players like Emmanuel Forbes have been playing so bad, he's been forced to play on the outside. They did make that trade for Marshawn Lattimore. Lattimore will hopefully start practicing this week. What does it mean for the Commanders in their secondary with the cornerback specifically? The question will be, will Lattimore replace Benjamin St. Juste at cornerback and leave Sainristil on the outside? Or do they move Lattimore to the outside opposite St. Juste, move Sainristil into the slot, and put Noah Igbenamye, and I know I butchered his name too, but the guy who's from Auburn, who they've been using in the slot, do the Commanders move him to the bench? That's a question I have no line of sight to. My crystal ball is really foggy on this one. Oh man, if I had to place a bet right now, I'm betting that it's Noah Igbenamye. Sorry, I'm butchering the name. That's why I stuttered. He goes to the bench and Sainristil moves inside. But that's a bet. It's not one of these 80% confidence. It's more like 40% confidence, folks. So we'll have to watch and see how that plays out. Cowboys versus the Texans. Moving on to them. They played 63 snaps on defense. In the secondary, both Deron Bland and Jordan Lewis, both inactive. Eric Kendricks and DeMarvion Overshown played 100% of the snaps. Now, last week when we talked, I mentioned to keep an eye out on the practice reports for Overshown because he did have an injury the week before to his knee. Turned out not severe, not a big deal. He played 100% of the snaps. Unfortunately, Overshown only finished with 5 tackles, 4 solo. But you heard Troy Aikman probably, if you watched the game, singing his praises during the game. Someone I still want, particularly for Dynasty, someone I'm still putting in my lineup. Damone Clark, for those of you in deeper Dynasty leagues, was ruled inactive if you did not see that. So Damone Clark is getting close to droppable. The only reason I haven't dropped him is I still feel like Kendricks is going to get hurt. And if Kendricks gets hurt, as he typically does, and given his age, Clark will be the one that's inserted into the lineup and playing probably 90 to 100% of the snaps. Micah Parsons back 95% of the snaps he played. During the broadcast, they mentioned at one point in the game he had 10 pressures. Unfortunately, it translated to zippo, nada, zeros on the sack department. In fact, he only had 1 assisted tackle. You have to keep running him out there. The one thing I worry about is the Cowboys just totally imploding. But for now, keep on running him out there as long as you don't see anything attitude-wise that is concerning. While Parsons played 95% of the snaps, Chauncey Golston also played 95% of the snaps. Carl Lawson was all the way down to 24%. So they did move Micah around a little bit, but he played mostly on the edge. But boy, that's a lot. That's going to wear these players down as the years go on, as the year and the season goes on, folks. That is a little bit of a worry point. Maybe Marshawn Nealon, who they said the injury wasn't going to have him out all year, can come back, give these guys a little bit of a break, which will actually probably make them more efficient for the snaps they do play. The Giants were on bye. Let's move to the Eagles versus the Commanders. The Eagles played 66 snaps on defense. Zach Bowen, 100%. Nakobe Dean, 95%. Both of them had stellar stat lines, with Zach Bowen at 15 tackles, including a pass defense as well. Nakobe Dean with 10 tackles and a pass defense as well. Reed Blankenship, who in this Fangio scheme for the most part has been playing very deep, but the way the game worked out with Daniels targeting the tight ends and running backs so much and hardly targeting the wide receivers, Blankenship ended up with 10 tackles, 4 solo, and an interception, which also gives them the pass defense. Of course, do not expect that to repeat. Don't go chasing those points. This is an outlier more than a trend in Ricky's opinion. Don't chase it. Josh Sweat had another sack this week to go along with 3 tackles total. That gives him 4 sacks in the last 5 games. Keep on rolling Josh Sweat out there. Jalen Carter played 100% of the snaps at defensive tackle. That is freaking amazing, folks. If he's going to play that kind of snappage and you've been wondering, do you play him or not? At 100% of the snaps, and you end up with 7 tackles, 4 solo, and a tackle for loss, that beast, as we've talked about, is now getting that kind of playing time where you need to play a defensive tackle, interior defensive lineman. Jalen Carter goes into your lineup. Just one other thing on Cooper DeJean. Last 3 weeks, he's played 97% of the snaps, 87%, and 96% of the snaps. Plus, he's getting you some punt return yards. Cornerback required leagues, if he's going to play that amount of snaps, if they're going to keep him on the field that much, he's someone you can put into your lineups in these cornerback required leagues. Okay, let's move to the NFC South, folks. Bucks are on bye, Panthers on bye. Let's go to the Falcons. They played 62 snaps on defense. Now, everybody's singing the praises of Bo Nix and his over 300 yards and his 4 touchdowns and his over 80% completion rate. No rookie's ever done that before. Now, the Falcons aren't great on defense, let's be honest. But when you also have Mike Hughes, D. Alford, and Antonio Hamilton, 3 of your top 4 cornerbacks, that's certainly going to help the opposition's offense. So the hype over Bo Nix is he's doing well, but let's not get carried away. Okay, quick offensive tidbit for you all to keep in mind. Troy Anderson, hurt again, out again. J.D. Bertrand was already out, but that didn't really make a difference. Caden Ellis played 100% of the snaps, had a very solid line with 10 tackles, 8 solo, a tackle for loss, quarterback hit. Nate Landman, 97% of the snaps, 8 tackles, 5 solo. Great for Landman. Great that Landman owners have been able to leverage him that much because of the Troy Anderson continuing injury situation. I still think if Anderson ever gets healthy and can make it through a game, eventually he will displace Landman. At a minimum, he'll rotate with him, which would destroy Landman's viability. Going to the safety side of things, Jesse Bates had 10 tackles, 5 solo, and a pass defense. That was Bates' second highest tackle count for the year, his highest since week 2. So just keep that in mind. That's probably more the outlier side as opposed to a consistent theme on the tackles. Okay, so I read some articles that talked about Matt Judon finally getting another sack, and that he, I think that's 2.5 for the year, if I remember correctly. He had 1.5 earlier in the year. The one he had, literally, Nix tripped over his lineman. Judon went over and tapped him down on the ground, and then started doing a celebration, and with some signs around his head and neck and stuff. And I'm like, what the heck, dude? The dude fell down. You got lucky and tapped him. You certainly didn't earn it. 32 years old. I did a quick check on PFF as well. His pass rush win rate, as well as his run defense rate, are the lowest of his career. And so Judon, let him go if you haven't already, folks. Think about it. The Falcons only have 10 sacks this year as a team. Trey Hendrickson has either 11 or 11.5 by himself. That's what Bo Nix went against, folks. Don't get too caught up with Bo Nix. He's good, but let's keep it in perspective. All right, I'm probably going to have some hater comments on the YouTube comments here. Saints versus Browns. Saints played 73 snaps. Once again, I still don't know how they won, but they won. They played 78 snaps also last week against the Falcons. So all those snaps on defense seems like the other team's offense are just destroying them in yards and all. But field goal kickers are missing kicks against them, and it's leading to other challenges. And the Saints are winning. But if they could play that many snaps, there's opportunities. Linebacker Demario Davis. I was beginning to worry about him that it's over. It's time for him to retire. You get a new coach that's motivating and communicating with players and so forth. And Demario Davis leads the team in tackles for the second week in a row, by the way, which coincides with the new interim coach. 13 tackles, 3 solo, a tackle for loss, and 2 pass defense. For those of you in contention for winning your leagues this year, particularly given Demario Davis's age in dynasty leagues, he might be a very sneaky pickup for you to try and get in a trade with someone on other teams, and you can sell the whole story where his stats have been for the year, not as focused on the current stuff. He could be a sneaky person to help you win your championship. Pete Werner, playing with a hand injury, only plays 66% of the snaps, 6 tackles, 3 solo. Not exactly a very good game for Werner, though. Willie Gay only played 8% of the snaps. So that's that was the linebacker core for the Saints. Let's move on to the secondary. When I'm wrong, guys and gals, I do like to admit when I'm wrong, and I did make a crystal ball prediction, and that one was incorrect. I predicted that Amadi would go off the field and Shamar Jean-Charles would stay on the field with Kool-Aid if Kool-Aid McKinstry came back. McKinstry did come back. Jean-Charles was the one that was off the field, played 0% of the snaps on defense. Ugo Amadi stayed in the slot. Alontae Taylor stayed out wide. So that's how things ended up playing out. So giving you some of the numbers. McKinstry played 99% of the snaps, 3 tackles, 2 solo. As I mentioned, Shamar Jean-Charles, no stats. Ugo Amadi, 9 tackles, 4 which were solo, no sacks, no quarterback hits. But of the 90% of the snaps he played 90% of the snaps. 99% of those, so basically 100% of all the snaps he played were either in the slot or in the box or on the D-line. So as of now, Amadi's playing that key slot role that Taylor was playing. Now, Taylor did play 99% of the snaps. He got 8 tackles, 5 of which were solo. He got 2 pass defenses, and 90% of his snaps were on the outside. So there was a few where he wasn't. So sometimes when you get to some of these, 3rd and 1 kind of situations, he ends up playing, closer to the line of scrimmage. But he got picked on a lot. His best position right now is in the slot. On the outside, he's getting picked on a lot. And when he gets picked on a lot, it creates a lot of opportunities for tackles. And when you play more than the average 65, 66 snaps, as the Saints did with 73, it creates more opportunities. So Taylor can continue to be effective for you. You probably just won't see the sacks in the quarterback hits like you were previously. Going to the defensive line, Brian Bresee, second-year former first-round pick, ended up with 1.5 sacks, 3 tackles total. He's going to have those spikes into a lot of interior defensive linemen do, but I do like the future for Brian Bresee for you dynasty owners. At the defensive end position, we saw Carl Granderson. He reappeared. He reemerged, whatever you'd like to say. He actually got a sack this past week. 4 tackles, 3 solo, 2 tackle for loss, and a quarterback hit, which is that sack, of course. Cam Jordan was up to a season-high 67% of the snaps. 3 tackles, 1 of which was solo, a pass defense, and a quarterback hit. He actually looked kind of rejuvenated as I was watching the Saints game, because I had to see how they did, folks, my Saints. But so Jordan was back out there. Chase Young, 62% of the snaps. He also had half a sack among his 2 tackles. Peyton Turner was a little bit lower in the snap count. He was about 41% last week, if I remember correctly, a little bit over 40. 33% this week, only ended up with 1 assisted tackle. At the safety position, there's been a lot of rotation. Will Harris played 100% of the snaps. Jordan Howden only played 40%. The Honey Badger played, of course, is near 100% of the snaps. So that's the Saints. There was a lot to talk about there. Hope you followed along. Okay, let's move on to the NFC West. The Cardinals were on bye. So let's talk about the 49ers. The 49ers only played 60 snaps. Big news, of course, for the 49ers. Nick Bosa was injured going into the game with some people saying oblique, some people saying hip, whatever it is. He re-injured or hurt it worse during the game. Him not being in on that last series, in my opinion, is what caused the 49ers to lose that game to the Seahawks. They just couldn't get enough pass rush. Geno finally had time and also was able to scramble because he didn't have Bosa all over him. And as a result, that's why the 49ers lost. But Bosa did have 1.5 sacks before he left, but he only played 43% of the snaps because they were subbing him out quite a bit. He's usually in the mid 80s. I have a feeling that Nick Bosa will not be playing this week. I'd be shocked if he was, to be honest with you. So start making alternate plans for those of you with Nick Bosa in your lineups on your rosters. Yetur Gross-Matos was activated from IR, the free agent signing from the offseason, played 62% of the snaps. He had 2 tackles and a sack. Is that going to be repeatable? Well, he won't be going against the Seahawks offensive line, folks. So I'm not sure I would be considering that a one-for-one swap for Bosa, but with 6 teams on bye in deep leagues, that's where you may be. I would prefer Leonard Floyd if he is available as a free agent in your leagues. If I did have to do something with the 49ers to replace Bosa, he played 63% of the snaps, 3 tackles, 2 solo, a sack and a half, and 3 quarterback hits in total. Floyd is the one I want over Yetur Gross-Matos. At the linebacker position, Devondre Campbell once again played 100% of the snaps. That's 2 weeks in a row. 7 tackles, 2 solo. Not a great stat line, but 100% of the snaps. Fred Warner, people were wondering, did he get hurt? Did he not play? He did play 100% of the snaps, but he only had 3 tackles and 1 solo. Seahawks pretty much, let's just say, kind of abandoned the running game for the most part. Geno was chucking it all over the place, and he was targeting JSN and DK Metcalf and AJ Barner. And it just didn't work out for Warner this past week. Don't pull the panic button on that. On Drake Greenlaw, on Tuesday, Kyle Shanahan talked about the fact that they hope to have him practicing this next week. Now, or excuse me, he said next week. So is that the week of November 18th, implying the week coming up, or is that the week of the 25th? Not sure yet. Either way, Shanahan also said it's going to take at least a couple of weeks of practice for Greenlaw to get up to speed. My bet is they probably open up the 21-day practice window for Greenlaw, but we don't see him for at least 2 more weeks, if not 3, before we see him on the field. And I do expect it to be on a rotation. We talked about this on our IDP Start-Sit show, IDP Plus Start-Sit show that we do on Sunday mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 o'clock Central on this YouTube channel. I invite you all to come in and join, ask your start-sit questions there for the week. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch with so many teams on bye. You could put your questions in the comments before we even go live. So that way it's earlier in the queue and you have a chance to get your question answered before we run out of time, which has happened the past couple of weeks. We haven't got to all the questions because we've gotten so many. So we invite you to join IDP Plus Start-Sit show Sunday mornings, 11 Eastern time. Back to the 49ers. The only other thing I'll mention, D. Winters only played 17% of the snaps after 25% in the previous game when he came back from concussion. It looks like they're sticking with Warner and Campbell at least until Greenlaw is healthy, and we'll see how it plays out. The Rams versus Patriots. A lot to talk about on the Rams. And I need to pick up the pace, I know, but love sharing all this information with you all. And once again, if you think I'm giving you too much information, please leave it in the comments and let me know. Or if you like the what I'm giving you, tell me that as well. Back to the Rams. Quentin Lake played 100% of these snaps, 11 tackles, 7 solo, 1 pass defense. The beautiful news this week is Quentin Lake only played 29% deep. I wish the Rams would be a little bit more consistent. Hopefully you've still been playing him, but he played 71%, much closer to the line this week. Last week, he played 51% deep, or the previous game, I should say. So from 51 down to 29. That's what led to him having all these tackles and a great, fantastic game for IDP. Cam Curl was back to 100% after it looked like we had a Kinchin's platoon with Curl going. Curl was coming back from an injury and so forth. We thought maybe that was part of it, but now all of a sudden, Curl was back to 100% of snaps. 66% of those were deep, though. So that's where those deep snaps went to, was to Curl. As a result, he only had 4 tackles, 3 solo. He did pick up a couple of pass defenses, though. Cam Kinchins still played 54% of the snaps, and he had 8 tackles, 6 solo, a tackle for loss, a pass defense, and interception. He played 78% of his snaps deep. So Curl and Kinchins took most of the deep snaps, not all. Blake did play some back there. Blake played closer to the line of scrimmage. Let's go to linebackers, and we'll come to Jalen McCullough, because there's a little bit of tied to safety as well there too. Roseboom had a very great game from an IDP stats perspective. 11 tackles, 4 solo. He only played 64% of the snaps, though. That's hyper efficient, which is great. Last week, he only played 62% of the snaps. That's going to be hard to continue. On top of that, Troy Reeder, if I remember correctly, I think he just completed his 4th week of being on IR. What does that mean? He can be activated to become eligible to start playing again a 53-man roster. He didn't have a massive injury. It was a hamstring, if I remember correctly. Reeder could very well be put right back into the lineup, play 100% of the snaps where he was before, and kill the value of Roseboom, kill the value of Spites. Something to be very careful of. Please watch the practice reports. Watch the who's inactive and active if they do activate Reeder, so that you know. But once again, come to the Start Sit show. We can probably talk about it. Omar Spites played 55% of the snaps. The week before, he played 74%. The week before that, he played 6%. Let's say not exactly consistent, but he had 6 tackles and 5 solo during this last game against the Patriots. But once again, that was in 77 snaps. You would expect it probably a little bit more. Jalen McCullough back up to 38% of the snaps after 25% previous game and then 70% the week before. Now he's landing at 38% this week. Don't know what to trust. Seems like it's very game plan specific. So 38% of the snaps translated to 29 snaps total. He played 17 of those in the box, in that kind of inside linebacker position. He played 7 in the slot, so 24 of the 29 near the line of scrimmage. He played 5 deep. So that's why McCullough played all over the place, and he ended up with 5 tackles, 3 solo, a quarterback hit. So that's where his stats landed. With that kind of snap count, that kind of inconsistency, hard to play him. Out of all these Rams, particularly if Reeder is activated, the only one I'm comfortable playing right now is Quentin Lake out of all those folks we just talked about. Braden Fisk, I joked a little bit about last week, said, yes, he did play, folks. He just happened to have no stats. Similar to what I talked about with Brissy, interior defensive lineman. You're going to have your up and down weeks, particularly for these younger players. And, of course, Fisk is a second-round pick this year. He played 57% of the snaps this week, 3 solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. So when he does hit, that he's going to hit pretty well, but you're going to have a lot of down weeks as well for those of you that are in leagues where you have to play a interior defensive lineman / defensive tackle. For dynasty leagues, I still want Fisk on my roster. Wrapping up the NFC, the Seahawks against the 49ers. They only played 63 snaps this past week, which the previous week, 76 and 77 snaps. I expect the trend to be more towards 76 and 77, less towards the 63 as we move forward. Now, during the bye week, we talked about it last week, they released Tyrell Dodson, their leading tackler. We expected Ernest Jones to wear the green dot, play 100% of the snaps. That's certainly what happened. And he had 13 tackles, 6 solo, really good on 63 snaps. As expected, also, Tyrese Knight was the number 2 linebacker. I did warn and say, be careful. I don't think he's going to play 100% of the snaps. I don't think they trust him to play in passing downs, things along those lines. He actually played a little bit more than I expected. He played 81% of the snaps and had a hyper-efficient 10 tackles, 4 solo, and a quarterback hit. I did mention Drake Thomas's name last week. He only played 2 snaps. So they played more defensive backs as Knight came off the field. So that's what ended up happening. Julian Love, another solid game, 9 tackles, 7 solo, a tackle for loss. Devin Witherspoon, for those of you in cornerback leagues, another great game where you have to play cornerbacks because of the amount of time he spends in the slot. Definitely someone that you can play.
Well, I was looking for a prize for my new league, a belt or a ring or a nice trophy. My IDP guys went and had my back. The best swag online for champs is found on Trophy Smack. RING, that spells ring. TrophySmack.com has the bling. Good, so good, I have to sing. Go and check them out, they have everything. I can show that I'm the master of my craft. I'm a champion in fantasy and I won't let you forget that. RING, that spells ring. TrophySmack.com has the bling. Use promo code IDPGuys at checkout for a free ring on TrophySmack.com.
All right, let's move on to the AFC. Bills only played 55 snaps. Terrell Bernard played 100% of the snaps. Nice line, given 55 snaps with 8 tackles, 3 solo, a sack. Tackle for loss, an interception, including pass defense, and a sack. Very, very great line. Dorian Williams played 96% of the snaps. One of his least efficient, if not the most inefficient. I didn't have a chance to go back and check that, but very inefficient with only 4 tackles, one of which was solo and a quarterback hit. As we talked about, the Matt Milano 21-day window is open. Milano's most likely to impact Dorian Williams when he comes back and is made active. There could be a little bit of a rotation to start when Milano does get added to the 53 and starts playing. But at some point, I expect Milano to take over for Dorian Williams. But don't drop Dorian Williams because Terrell Bernard has been so injury prone. I could see Milano moving to that Mike spot and where the green dot where Terrell Bernard is if Bernard does get hurt, which has happened more than once in his career. Not much else to talk about on the Bills. Let's go to the Dolphins. Big linebacker story. The Seahawks waived Terrell Dodson. Dolphins claimed him. They didn't wait for him to become a free agent and try and sign him to get him cheaper. They claimed him and picked up his contract. That means they thought very highly of him. He didn't play anything this past week. Of course, they just had him about a week. They also released David Long, as we talked about with the Lions. The Lions signed David Long, someone to watch over there. So don't drop David Long necessarily because he got signed to their practice squad. In case you jumped around, I just wanted to mention that if you jumped around on the video here. Jordan Brooks played 100% of the snaps. He led teams with 12 tackles, 8 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Anthony Walker played 98% of the snaps, 10 tackles, 6 solo. So why the Terrell Dodson prelude before I got into that? I am concerned for Anthony Walker that Terrell Dodson, when he gets comfortable, will take Walker's spot in the defense. I don't think they claimed him with the contract to have him be the 3rd linebacker. So watch the reports. Look for even Miami beat writer type of reports. See if there's any signals that Dodson may jump in ahead of Anthony Walker. If you have other options other than Walker, which it might be hard with 6 byes this coming week, I'd be looking at these other options. But if you have to take a chance on Walker, he could end up playing about 98% of the snaps again, but it is risky. Just want y'all to be aware. Calais Campbell, another sack. The dude's incredible at age 38. I've talked about that before. Zach Sealer playing with that orbital bone fracture around his eye, 75% of the snaps, 4 tackles, 3 solo, got a sack and 2 quarterback hits. Chop Robinson did not make it to 3 weeks in a row with a sack. PFF graded him very well, as a side note, on a pass rush perspective, but he actually played less snaps than he had been playing this past week. He was down to 43% after playing over 50% the last 5 weeks, including 3 greater than 60%. So, he went back to what looked more like a pass rush type of role this week. Hard to rely on that. He's growing on me for Dynasty, not looking to use him for redraft. But I'm still not sold on him for Dynasty as a FYI, folks. The Jets versus the Colts. Can the Jets find many more ways to lose and implode. Well, they're certainly exploding with now their GM gone in addition to their head coach being fired, and their owner potentially being on some sort of presidential cabinet role, going back to England or something along those lines. Other than that, nothing happened with the Jets leadership. Okay, CJ Mosley was inactive again. Jeremy and Sherwood, 99% of the snaps. Quincy Williams, 100%. Sherwood, very inefficient this week, though. 6 tackles, 4 solo, quarterback yet. Same with Quincy Williams, 6 tackles, 3 solo. Now, the Colts do not give up a lot of points to linebackers and vice versa as the Jets to the Colts. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So not surprised by these results. Quinnen Williams played 73% of the snaps, had a big game. That's the Quinnen Williams we expect to see. But with all the imploding that's going on with the Jets, or exploding, depending on which word you want to use, I am worried about the attitude, morale of the Jets organization. Now there's a talk that Aaron Rodgers will be going next year. I'm worried about if I'm playing some Jets, particularly as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, folks. Particularly in redraft, if you can make some deals to try and get rid of some Jets to pick up someone else, I'm certainly looking to do it. Wrapping up on the Jets, let's talk about their secondary, though. Chuck Clark activated from IR, played 99% of the snaps, 6 tackles, 3 solo. I was really worried and wondering what was going to happen with Jalen Mills, who still in most formats is listed as a cornerback, but has been playing safety position. Well, Mills played 100% of the snaps as well. He had 6 tackles, 4 solo. He played 34% deep, but he played 66% in the box / in the slot / on the D line. So that's good. And I was surprised that Jalen Mills actually got those snaps. I thought maybe Isaiah Oliver potentially, thought maybe Tony Adams, Ashton Davis with Clark coming back. All were potential worry spots, but it was Mills. Once again, it's similar to Anthony Walker. It could be risky to put Mills into your lineup, but with the 6 buys, he could be worth it this coming week, taking that chance for those of you that particularly need to play cornerbacks. Hassan Reddick, before I leave the Jets, I got to talk about him. He played 37% of the snaps. He did leave with an injury. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. So 3 of the 4 weeks that he's played, 37, 39, and 37% of the snaps, with 37 being the latest. He did have a 57% in his second game, not his third game, but his second game. So between the hamstring injury and the lack of playing time, it feels like he's the number 3 defensive end behind McDonald and Clemens. For redraft, folks, and what I was describing related to the Jets, I'm not playing Reddick, folks. Just not doing it. Patriots, to wrap up the AFC East. They only played 52 snaps on defense. Now, very happy to see Christian Barmore quickly being activated after the 21-day window opened. He only played 40% of the snaps. He did have 3 tackles, 3 which were solo on that only 40% of only 52 snaps. So it's pretty good. Do I really expect someone who's missed this much of the season to ramp up in the next couple of weeks and all of a sudden you're sticking them in your lineup and expecting the Barmore from last year? No, I don't. As we start getting to week 16 and week 17, if this trend continues, maybe I'm looking to play him in those semifinal and final playoff games, but not right now. I'm not quite willing to take that chance right now unless I'm in a desperate situation. Patriots linebackers. It almost feels like the Rams. Okay, this week, Tavai, after being 100% last week, 81% this week. Now, Christian Ellis was out last week. He was back this week. Ellis plays 69% of the snaps. Ellis was in a little bit on the passing downs than Tavai was, the obvious ones in particular. So that's why Tavai down to 81%, 7 tackles, 4 solo. Ellis, 5 tackles, 3 solo, and he did get a quarterback hit. We warned you about the Patriots once Bentley went on IR. This trend has continued. Just don't get your hopes too high if you're playing Tavai or Christian Ellis in your lineup. You could get 10 tackles, 11 tackles from a Tavai, or you could get 6 or 7 or even 5, depending on the situation. Sion Taki was the number 3 linebacker for the Patriots. As a side note, played 35% of the snaps and had a whopping 1 assisted tackle. We're not chasing Taki right now. But heck, with the way they've been rotating him, maybe I wouldn't be surprised to see Taki at 80%, but don't bet on that. That is like a 1% probability. Don't run and take that to the bank, please, please, please. Kyle Duggar was active after being injured and out for several weeks. He played 100% of the snaps. When I first looked at the box score, I saw he only had 3 assisted tackles. That was it. I'm like, well, he must not played all the snaps and all. Well, lo and behold, he played 100%. I was thinking maybe he played like 50%. And a decent amount of those snaps were closer to the line. He only played 33% of his snaps deep. This feels like a bad outlier as opposed to some of the good outliers I called out that I wouldn't rely on. I would count on Duggar, I think, to up the stats based on the playing time and based on where he typically plays in alignment. Now, remember, they only play 52 snaps. That contribute as well. Keon White, lastly for the Patriots, played 81% of the snaps. You got to keep on when he's playing that percent, which he has the past couple of weeks now. When he's playing that kind of percent of snaps, you got to roll him out there for those requiring interior defensive line / defensive tackles. He had 3 tackles, 1 solo, 1 pass defense, 1 quarterback yet. So we are still playing Keon White, folks. Let's move to the AFC North. The Bengals versus the Chargers. Oh my gosh, can the Bengals find more ways to lose close games? They're 4-7, and they could easily be, it feels like 8-3, but they are 4-7. With that, they played 67 snaps on defense. Now, one of the things that was very interesting that was called out during the broadcast, Chris Collingsworth, who obviously was a former Bengal as well, talked about the fact that the Bengals coaching staff is feeling like their defense is older and slower, and there's been more and more rotations happening as a result. We've talked about the safety rotations. We'll talk about this more as we go through the Bengals. So at the safety position, let's go ahead and start there. Jordan Battle played 40%. Von Bell played 60%. So those two have basically been in a rotation. Von Bell's series, for lack of a better term, tended to have more plays than the ones Battle was in, but neither one had any good stats. Battle was 2 tackles, 1 solo. Von Bell, 2 tackles, 2 solo. As they get further out of the playoff picture and they start looking to next year, expect Battle to move up towards 80, 90, 100%. Expect Von Bell to trend down as they start looking towards next year. There's no way Von Bell's going to be back. I just cannot see that. Okay, so that's the safety position. At defensive end, Sam Hubbard, once again, only played 45% of the snaps. We've talked about on previous episodes of this show that Hubbard is playing with an injury, 2 his PFF stats. And I know not everybody's a big fan of PFF and so forth. I get it, but his pass rush win rate has been abysmal. Joseph Asai, he was up to 43% of the snaps. Miles Murphy was at 34%. Miles Murphy's PFF pass rush stats were pretty bad as well. But what's happening is Hubbard is coming down. We've been talking about that. Osai is moving up. If you could find a sucker to take Hubbard because of the name brand value, do it. Hubbard will not be back with the Bengals next year. I cannot see that happening. And it'll be more Osai and Murphy as we move forward. So for you Dynasty folks, keep that in mind. And Hendrickson is on the last year of his contract as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So he could be going as well because the Bengals are probably not going to pay a 31-year-old a big contract. He'll be 31 in about a month or so, if I remember correctly. Okay, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, 8 tackles and 4 solo, both had identical lines. You're rolling both of those guys out. In fact, Pratt is outscoring Wilson in a lot of scoring systems this year. So Pratt is actually ahead of Logan Wilson, even though the name brand is the other way around. Okay, and by the way, Mike Hilton, same thing with him. We talked on a previous episode, what's going on with Hilton, why he's not playing as many snaps. It's the age, it's the inability to guard man-to-man is catching up with him, and we're going to start seeing more of these younger cornerbacks, the Josh Newtons of the world as an example. Unfortunately, DJ Turner broke his clavicle and went on IR, so that'll have a little bit of an impact to their cornerbacks, but expect more of Newton, expect less of Hilton, and expect more DJ Ivy as well. The Browns only played 60 snaps versus the Saints, but yet gave up 35 points. Grant Delpit, who went to my beloved LSU, is from Louisiana originally, playing in the Superdome in New Orleans, led the team with tackles with 9, of which 3 were solo, and he had a pass defense, which, by the way, he probably would have had an interception, but I think it was Foster Moreau actually wrapped his hands around the face mask and the goggles of Delpit so he couldn't see anything. That's why the ball just hit him in the chest. Okay, moving on. Jordan Hicks in the linebacker position. Hicks played 100% of the snaps, only 6 tackles, 2 solo. And with JOK on injured reserve, expect that to continue here as we move forward. Devin Bush played 72% of the snaps. Mahamoud Diabate, which once again I butchered his name, and apologies for that. But Bush had 72 on that 72% of the snaps, had 8 tackles, 6 solo, and 2 tackles for loss. Diabate had 7 tackles, 4 solo, and a tackle for loss. Both of them were, quote, much more efficient from a tackling perspective than Hicks was. So while I expect the Hicks trend to continue here in the short term, as they potentially get further and further out of the playoff race, and we get to those last few weeks of the season, I could see Hicks going out, Bush potentially going out, and I could see Diabate, and if JOK is able to come back from that when he got put on IR and that whole head injury and so forth that he had, I could see those two being in there as we get towards the end of the year. Myles Garrett, 75% of the snaps, but he put up 0 stats from an IDP perspective. That's a nada, a zilch, a zippo, a 0. The week before, he had a great game where he had 3 sacks. This week, nothing. Now, turns out he had some sort of hip injury because as we go into the Thursday night game, he didn't practice on Tuesday because of this hip injury. There's been no indication that he won't play, but something you got to watch very, very carefully for those of you that have him on your rosters in terms of watch out for your Thursday night lineups. Be sure you're able to pull him out if he is inactive on Thursday night. With the Zadarius Smith trade, last thing I want to talk about with the Browns, Okoronkwo was up to 63% of the snaps with a very good pass rush grade from PFF as a side note. Isaiah McGuire played 48% of the snaps, and Ellison Smith, who they just signed to the active roster from the practice squad, played 20%. Former 5th-round pick from the Jaguars or the Giants, one of the two, I can't remember which. There was 2 Smiths that went in that draft. It was one of the 2. But anyway, not someone we're picking up. Okoronkwo could be someone in very, very deep leagues that might be worth targeting. With the caveat, for leagues that have big play scoring for sacks, not necessarily for the tackles, but for the sacks. The Ravens played 78 snaps against the Steelers. That's after playing 82, 72, and a very nice 69 the last 3 weeks. So the Ravens defense is on the field a lot. You would expect heavy IDP counting stats as a result. Now, let's talk about what happened, though. Roquan Smith left the game with an injury. It was roughly the early 4th quarter, if I'm remembering correctly. But in that time, he had 13 tackles, 8 solo, 2 tackle for loss. The other challenging thing, if I'm remembering correctly, the Baltimore Ravens play on Monday night. So if that's the case, you need to start planning now. If there's no word about Roquan Smith and will he be able to play with his hamstring injury, you're going to have an alternative. And with 6 teams in bye, start planning now for who's going to go in the lineup if Roquan Smith cannot play on Monday night. Trent Simpson played 85% of the snaps. He only had 6 tackles and 2 solo. So the last 3 weeks, 90%, 97, 97. 85 is not bad, but boy, when you play 78 snaps and that's your production, that just doesn't feel great. Malik Harrison picked up the snaps once Roquan Smith went out of the game with his injury. He ended up playing 47% of total. He had 6 tackles and 4 solo. Malik Harrison, so back to the contingency for Roquan Smith, I'd be willing to bet is probably on a lot of waiver wires, except in very deep leagues and very deep dynasty leagues. So maybe he becomes your pivot if Roquan Smith is out. Odafe Owe, I talked about him last week. 4 quarterback hits last week, but no sacks. I talked about how I was high on him. I like his future. Unfortunately, they only played in 45% of the snaps this week, but 5 tackles, 3 solo, 2.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits. Now, the Steelers' offensive tackles are not that great. They're really struggling this year. So he took advantage of it, which is fantastic. But on that low snap count, you need to have, our snap percent. Luckily, they played a lot of snaps. He was on the field quite a bit as a result, and he was playing against weak offensive tackles. So if you're thinking about playing him, think about the matchup, think about the offensive tackles he's going against and those opportunities if you're going to take a risk in playing him, because he's just as likely to give you a potential goose egg right now as he is the 2.5 sacks as he had this past week. Kyle Hamilton previous week left the game with a boot, thought he might not play. Well, he played all but 1 snap this past week, 10 tackles, 9 solo, great game. The other news is at the other safety position. Marcus Williams played 1 snap. Eddie Jackson didn't even get brought on the trip. Ardarius Washington became the safety that started along with Kyle Hamilton. He played 100% of the snaps, 11 tackles, 6 solo, 1 tackle for loss. So what does that tell you? Those linebackers weren't making the tackles, so therefore the safeties were. Ardarius Washington is someone that I am definitely looking to pick up. We know they already benched Marcus Williams once. Clearly, Eddie Jackson did something to piss off the team that they didn't even put him on the flight and bring him on the trip. So Ardarius Washington is the person to pick up, folks, and he could be worth putting in your starting lineup this week. All right, let's go to the Steelers. They only played 61 snaps in defense, and Patrick Queen had a revenge game against the Ravens, who he played with his first 4 years, played 100% of the snaps. Very, very good game with 10 tackles, 3 solo, tackle for loss, and a great strip fumble / fumble recovery that he did during that game. So Patrick Queen had a very good game, but this has been more of an outlier game for him. Although the last few weeks, his stats have picked up compared to earlier in the year. Someone, if your trade deadline hasn't passed and you got desperate at linebacker for some reason, maybe you lost a Jack Gibbons that you've been relying on, Queen could be a target you might be able to get for a reasonable price. Landon Roberts, 51% of the snaps, only 3 tackles, none of which were solo. Peyton Wilson was once again very low, 34%. He did have 1 freaking amazing interception down the sidelines. I'll give him credit for that, but he is not playing enough. Can't rely on those big play points that you got in this 1 week to carry you. Don't put Wilson in your lineup. Someone I still want for Dynasty. Alex Highsmith hurt his ankle in the previous game, was ruled out this past Sunday. Thursday night game, he's hasn't officially been ruled out, but technically, but it's been said that he will be out on Thursday night. So what happened at the edge position opposite T.J. Watt, Watt played 85% of the snaps? What happened on the other side? Preston Smith was acquired in the trade. The last week, previous game, Nick Herbig was also out injured, so Preston Smith played a decent amount of snaps in that first game. He played 36% of the snaps when Highsmith went out with Herbig not active. Okay, so this week, Preston Smith only played 28% of the snaps. He had 1 tackle and 1 solo. Nick Herbig played 82% of the snaps this week. Now, it did translate 2 tackles, 1 solo, and 1 quarterback hit. And as I mentioned, so he was 82, Watt was 85. There's your 2 starting linebackers. Preston Smith is your backup rotational edge. So don't count on Preston Smith. I'm still willing to put Herbig in my lineups, particularly in big play leagues. He is one of these hustling machines from the edge, so someone who probably can get you an extra tackle or 2 as well because of the way he hustles. Lastly, Deshaun Elliott. Once again, 75% of the snaps is all he played after 70 and 75 the previous 2 weeks. 2 tackles, 1 solo. He did get a quarterback hit. DeMonte Casey continues to come in for him in obvious pass situations. The goodness we saw in Elliott's scoring earlier in the year, expected to continue to trend down as we stay in the 70% range. Try and trade him or otherwise find another one. I'd be willing to pick up Ardarius Washington in lieu of Deshaun Elliott, folks. Going to the AFC South. And wow, I'm going to set a record for length of time for this show, and I apologize in advance, folks. As y'all seen, y'all can jump around if you don't want to listen to the whole broadcast to the different divisions, if there's someone you want to listen to in particular. But if you're sticking with me the whole time, keep on sticking with me. I got more good info for you. On the Colts, EJ Speed, 96% of the snaps. Franklin, 100%. As I mentioned about the Jets' offense isn't causing our defense to stay on the field a lot, so that impacted their productivity somewhat. With Speed 9 tackles, 4 solo. Franklin 4 tackles, 3 solo. Kwity Paye though had a big game, and that's 3 straight games with a sack for him and 4 sacks total in his last 3 games. He's over that ankle injury from earlier this year. We're starting to see the first round Kwity Paye that I think a lot of people are hoping to see. Am I going to point chase? I don't know if I'm going to go like try and acquire him in a trade and overpay for him, but if I have him, I think I'm trusting him in my lineups as we move forward, folks. He had 7 tackles this past week, 6 of which were solo, 2 sacks. Of course, Rodgers is kind of sitting duck these days, and with the 2 sacks means 2 tackle for loss and 2 quarterback hits. The Jaguars played a whopping 80 snaps on defense after 84 the week before. Of course, it was a 52-6 blowout. So when you look at snap percentages, it becomes a little bit misleading for certain positions because a lot of those guys sat out later in the game. For example, you could look at Oluokun. He played 82% of the snaps overall, 9 tackles, 6 solo, but he was almost a full-time linebacker. It was like 98% of the snaps he played up until that junk time when he didn't play any of those. So he also played, I did see a stat on PFF, by the way. He played 15% of his snaps on the D line, which is not good for him for those counting stats we like. Devin Lloyd was back up to 90% of the snaps. Ventrell Miller was at 47%. Chad Muma, once again, junk time, picked up 15% of the snaps. Don't expect Muma. He's been out of the rotation. It's been just those other 3, Oluokun, Lloyd, and Miller. Oh, but boy, is there going to be a Jacksonville shakeup? By the time you watch this, I do record this on Tuesday nights to release on Wednesday morning. Could there be a shakeup come Wednesday morning? I'm surprised we haven't heard anything yet about a Peterson firing at this point in time, and potentially even something happening on the defense side of the ball as well. That could happen. That could impact the rotation in the linebacker position. Just keep an eye out, folks, if that happens. I actually shouldn't hope that anyone gets fired, don't get me wrong, but if something were to happen, I hope that they do go back to playing Oluokun and Lloyd both nearly 100% of the time. At the safety position, Darnell Savage played 100% of the snaps. Andre Cisco this week, 66% of the snaps after last week, 67%. Antonio Johnson, 37% of the snaps this week after 45% last week. We have a platoon, we have a timeshare, whatever you want to call it, between Cisco and Johnson. At one point, Cisco had taken over the role and was playing 100% of the snaps, and now it has gone back to a rotation. None of those guys are trustable, and Savage is not one who typically produces a lot in IDP. I'm not playing any of these safeties. Texans played over 80 snaps against the Cowboys this past Monday night. And with that, Jalen Pitre led the team with 9 tackles, 4 solo on 83% of the snaps. But when you play that many snaps, it's going to help with the IDP perspective, even when you play only 83% of the snaps. Kalen Bullock played 99% of the snaps at safety. Jimmy Ward and Eric Murray were both around 50%. So we're staying away from Ward and Murray. Bullock is more of your free safety than your in the box kind of safety. So not someone we're counting on as a side note from an IDP perspective, even though he played that many snaps. Kind of got interesting in linebacker. Azeez Al-Shaair, he played 88% of the snaps, 7 tackles, 4 solo. Not very efficient for all the time that the defense stayed on the field. The Texans stayed on the field on defense. Toto only played 31% of the snaps. 7 tackles, 6 solo, and 1 tackle for loss. So hyper efficient when he was on the field for those 31% of the snaps. And once again, they played 84 in total as a team. But Devin White played 60% of the snaps. Yes, that Devin White from LSU, formerly of Tampa Bay, who the Eagles released because he wasn't playing and he was probably being a little bit of an attitude problem. All of a sudden, 60% of the snaps. Now, he was very inefficient with 4 tackles, 3 of which were solo. In the second half, he played a heck of a lot more than Toto did, or Tuatuo, however you pronounce it, folks. So I'm avoiding White and Tuatuo this coming week. In addition, as a side note, I've been talking about Christian Harris, DeMarco Ryans, the head coach. He did say that Harris could be back after their Week 14 bye. So it could be just Al-Shaair and Harris as we get into playoff time. With that, you know what to do with it, folks, in terms of playing time and trying to trade or maneuvering your roster. Danielle Hunter, great game despite Will Anderson being ruled inactive because of that ankle injury. Hunter, 3 tackles, 3 solo, two sacks, and 3 quarterback hits. So a great game for Hunter. Wrapping up the AFC South with the Titans. They were on the field for 73 snaps against the Vikings. Jack Gibbons left the game with an ankle injury. I'm glad I didn't see it. I heard it might have been a little bit on the gruesome side. He was carted off with a broken ankle. But with that, he played 16% of the snaps on defense before leaving. With that, Jerome Baker played 84%. He had 1684, you get 100. That basically tells you Kenneth Murray and Jerome Baker are going to be playing 100% of the snaps side by side, at least until they decide maybe to give Cedric Gray, the rookie draft pick, a chance. I don't know if it was Gibbons leaving the game and Murray taking over more of what Gibbons was doing or something, but Murray had his most productive game in quite a while as a result. He had 10 tackles, 5 solo, a sack, a tackle for loss, and a quarterback hit. So it was nice to see some of that IDP productivity from Murray. Jerome Baker finished with 8 tackles, 4 solo, quarterback hit. Both of them, folks, we could put into our starting lineups. Roll with it, particularly if they're going to play 73 snaps, as a side note. At safety, Amani Hooker played 100% of the snaps. As a side note, and I kid you not, I worked with Exxon Corporation a long time ago before they became Exxon Mobil. And I worked in their refineries as an internal auditor. And when I worked there, I kid you not, there was a person whose name was Anita Hooker. Anita Hooker. Okay, I digress. So Hooker's playing 100% of the snaps. Mike Brown played only 67% of the snaps. So last week, he went in after the Diggs injury. He had been playing all the snaps after Quandre Diggs got hurt and then went on IR. Not this past Sunday. Brown played 67% of the snaps. Darrell Worley, who they pulled up from the practice squad, they may have signed him to the 53-man roster. I'll have to double check that. Apologies. He played 32% of the snaps. Not a good sign for Brown. I'm not playing Brown. I'm not playing Worley, folks. Both of them out of lineups. Shout out for Arden Key, not just because he went to LSU. He continues to play very well. 1 sack in 4 of the last 5 games. 5 sacks total over those 5 games. 5 tackles, 5 solo, 2 tackles for loss in addition to the sack and the quarterback hit here. He's playing some good ball. He's someone that often gets overlooked, gets picked up and dropped in leagues, someone you can look to pick up for sure. All right, let's go to the AFC West and wrap this thing up here, folks. And I just messed up my notes, so give me 30 seconds to fix that here. Okay, starting with the Broncos, who played against the Falcons. You already heard my Bo Nix diatribe as a side note. Listen to the Falcons if you've been skipping around. Go back and listen to that in the NFC South part. It was a blowout game, and the Broncos only played 59 snaps on defense. Cody Barton played 92% of those snaps, but only had 4 tackles, 3 solo. He did get an interception, which was great, but not really an efficient outing. Justin Sterner played 47% of the snaps, only 2 tackles, 2 solo, 1 tackle for loss. They elevated Zach Cunningham again from the practice squad instead of Quan Alexander because they don't want to sign Quan Alexander to the roster. So for the second week now, Cunningham gets pulled up. Cunningham did not play until junk time. He played 19% of the snaps at linebacker along with undrafted free agent Lavelle Bailey. Cunningham had 3 tackles and 1 solo. We're not picking up Cunningham. We still don't want to play Sterner. Okay? Now, I sent out a tweet on Sunday morning for those of you that follow me on Twitter, and I had a couple of pushback from my IDP friends. The tweet said, go pick up Drew Sanders. And my thought process is that Sanders potentially plays next to Barton. Since Sanders has been drafted, he originally started at inside linebacker with the Broncos. Now, that was pre-Sean Payton. Then he got moved to the edge. And then, of course, now we had this Achilles injury. And even before the Achilles injury that he had, there was talk about, will he play on the interior? Will he play on the edge? There was more signs that he was going to play on the edge. But with the way the edge players are playing right now, your Benitos, your Coopers, your Jonah Ellises, and even Tillman. I could see them given the opportunity to play Sanders on the inside. So I'm not guaranteeing that Sanders is in there next to Barton, but I think there's a possibility. So he's someone I'm looking to stash. I believe it's been 2 weeks now that he's been, that he's been activated with the 21 days to give him to practice. I could see him being activated, and I can see him potentially picking up that inside linebacker spot. I'm not guaranteeing it, but my crystal ball says there's a high possibility. He's worth the gamble if he takes that spot next to Barton. He might even be better than Barton by the time we get to fantasy football playoffs. So that's it. No guarantee, but a possibility. Okay, moving on. Nick Bonito, at least 1 sack in 7 of his last 8 games. This week, phenomenal line: 7 tackles, 4 solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. And that was only on 59% of the snaps, which is only 59 snaps in total. So 59% of 59. Keep on running Bonito out there, folks. Andale. Keep it going. Okay, Brandon Jones was inactive. P.J. Locke and Devin Key were the 2 primary safeties. P.J. Locke had 1 assisted tackle on 92% of the snaps. They keep on playing him deep. Devin Key played a little bit more of the Brandon Jones role with Jones being out. 81% of the snaps, 5 tackles, 2 solo. Not picking up Key, not even if Jones is inactive for another week. Back to Jonah Ellis real quick. I really like him from a dynasty perspective. He is someone I'm stashing, putting on my taxi squad at a minimum. The more he bulks up and the more experience he gets, I think he's going to be a phenom, folks. Put him on your rosters. Let's go to the Chargers. They played a whopping 82 snaps on defense. Deion Henley, 100% of the snaps, 11 tackles, 5 solo, pass defense, 2 quarterback hits. The linebacker situation is thinning out for the Chargers. Junior Colson and IR. Denzel Perryman only played 28% of the snaps, and he left with an injury. Troy Dye was the next man up. He played 33% of the snaps after Perryman left, 3 tackles, 1 solo. If Perryman doesn't play, who's a bit of a risk already, as we know, to play Denzel Perryman, for those that have been playing a long time know that. But if you're new to it, know it now. Troy Dye would be the one stepping in. He's only going to play about 50-60% of the snaps, folks. Don't get too excited. But some playing time, if you're desperate, you get it. Derwin James, best game of the year, 10 tackles, 7 solo, half a sack, 1 pass defense, 1 quarterback hit. Great game for Derwin James. If they continue to use him like this, if they use him as Derwin James in the past, you'll be glad you have him on your roster going to playoff time. Khalil Mack was ruled out. Joey Bosa was all the way up from roughly the 25-30% range of snaps, can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, to 67% this past week. So big jump against the Bengals. That led to 1 solo tackle, but 3 quarterback hits. So if Bose is healthy, that's what he can do. He can get after the quarterback. Still not someone I'm rushing to get in my lineup. I just have this fear that he'll pull a hamstring, hurt a toenail or something. He'll be out of the game. Tuipulotu. I can't say his name very well. We've learned that by now. I struggle with some of these names. Don't shoot me, folks. But he played a whopping 84% of the snaps this past week. So he had 4.5 sacks over the last 2 weeks, and then he adds another sack and a half. Now, I have to admit, last week, I told you I admit when I'm wrong, I wasn't as confident. I was worried that Khalil Mack would be back. I worried about Bosa playing more snaps. So I was worried that Tuipulotu would not play nearly as much and the efficiency would go down. I was wrong in that assessment. And watching that game, he was a hustling machine. So Tuipulotu, yeah, play him, get him in your lineups. Although, don't expect this kind of production, particularly when Khalil Mack is back and he picks up about 65% of the snaps overall from that edge group. And of course, Bud Dupree did play 65% of the snaps himself as well. He was winning a fool's gold from last week because he had 2 sacks and a very heavy stat line. This week, 1 assisted tackle, 2 quarterback hits is all Dupree had. Going on to the Chiefs, part of what I talked about with the Chiefs last week and the last 2 weeks is it's hard to trust the Chiefs when they're playing so few snaps on defense. The previous 3 weeks, they played 58 snaps, 52, 55. That's not going to be enough for our IDP players, folks, week over week for them to be successful? Well, against the Bills controlled that game. The Bills played a lot more on offense. The Chiefs were on the field for 73 snaps, so more than the typical average. What that means is when the Chiefs are playing a really good team that have the opportunity to potentially run the ball, short control passing game, etc., their defense may be on the field more, and that'll have you more comfortable playing a Nick Bolton or maybe even desperately a Drew Tranquill. Otherwise, hard to play those guys, particularly when the Chiefs are playing weaker teams. Tranquill led the team in tackles. He tied for the lead with 8 tackles, 3 solo, and 84% of the snaps. Nick Bolton did play 100% of the snaps. Now, it was interesting from a safety perspective because I've been talking about the lack of players playing 100% and a lot of rotations and who's playing more. Against a good team like the Bills, Reed plays 100%, Cook plays 100%, Connor played 73% as the third safety. But it really wasn't the third safety as much as he also played a lot in the slot. 83% of his 73% of the snaps were in the slot. And then another 17% of the snaps were in the D-line / box of the percent that he played. So the real starters are Reed and Cook, with Connor playing a little bit of that third safety / slot / in the box as a third linebacker instead of Chenal. That's how things are shaking out against good team for the Chiefs in that safety position rotation. Lastly, wrapping things up, the Raiders versus the Dolphins. They played a very nice 69 snaps on defense. Robert Spillane played 100 snaps, 100% of the snaps, 11 tackles, 5 solo, tackle for loss pass defense. Divine Diablo was all the way down to 68% of the snaps, only 4 tackles, 3 assists. This is what we were seeing at other times last year and earlier this year. We can't play Diablo with those kind of numbers, folks. Not much else exciting to talk about the Raiders except Maxx Crosby once again did not have a sack. I know we talked about the fact that he had that high ankle sprain, but I believe it's 4 weeks in a row now he's played 100% of the snaps without getting a sack. I'm not panicking. I'm still putting in my lineup. I'm not trading him away for cheap, anything along those lines. You got to keep playing him. That breakout game is going to come again for Crosby. Lastly, let's go back to Chris Jones for a second. The man is dominating the interior when he feels like it. He's just not getting that quarterback sack or those big play points kind of thing. And he's certainly, if the quarterback scrambles out the pocket, when you see him, isn't exactly a hustling machine like a T.J. Watt or Nick Herbig type, or like an Aaron Donald used to be. But you're going to drive yourself crazy if you have Chris Jones and he's on the bench when he gets 4 tackles, 3 solo, 2.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits. You're going to hate yourself when that happens. You almost have to keep on playing Chris Jones. Okay, that wraps things up. Sorry I went so much longer. I actually thought it was going to be shorter this week, but I had so much information I wanted to share with you all. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Give me your comments below so I can try and continue to improve this for you, my customers. Okay, you really are my customers, and I really want to make you all happy. That's the goal, and give you great information to help you win your leagues, whether it be redraft or dynasty or whatever it might be. Come join the IDP Plus family. As you can see, we still have the promo going with 20% off. There's also a monthly subscription you can do. We have a lot of great tools, which I've talked about in the past. We've got rankings. We've got great articles. Also, don't forget to check out our IDP Plus bets channel. People keep on saying it. A lot of people are winning a lot of money on props for defense. We do more than defense, but on defense in particular, as the booking companies, your FanDuels, your DraftKings, etc., just don't know how to quite do the defense side of things. With that, thank you all for sticking with me. Thank you all for the comments. And hopefully, once again, you'll join us on the IDP Plus Start Sit Show on Sunday morning, 11 Eastern, 10 Central. And with that, be good, stay safe, and good luck in your fantasy football leagues.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.